Good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and this gentleman to my left is George Webb, and welcome to my channel. It's called Macduff Lives. Tonight, welcoming George back here to Mystery Island Studio, where you've been out there flying around like an osprey, going from here to there, George, and God darn, it's good to have you home.
It is, even if I'm only going to be here a couple of days, it's great seeing you in person, John. Finally, we've been everywhere. We're going back to Florida, going back to CPAC, then going to Louisiana to follow up on your dad's stuff. And so, yeah, it's just, this is a nice little pit stop back home.
I can hardly keep up with you, though. Now you're going to CPAC. Isn't that like next week or something?
Yeah, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then on to New Orleans on Sunday. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So this is really going, and then we're going to get Eddie, hopefully, and Andy, if you're listening, Andy. Hopefully we'll get them down to New Orleans and maybe even get them down to CPAC and do some book signings and blah, 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 and all that.
Yeah, I talked to Aaron Adler yesterday. It sounds like he's up for going to Florida, too. So, but maybe that's a different trip. He was talking about going
in April as well.
Oh, in April, yeah.
Yeah. So
see, you guys are amazing.
Well, we got to go to GM Wave. We got to go to Operation Mongoose. We got to go to all these different places that, your dad made history. And so that's going to keep us really busy. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'll be with you in spirit and certainly want you to check in here at Macduff Lives as much as we can. I wish I could come with you, but it's just not going to work out.
Yeah. Well, John, I've been reading this book, Mole Hunt, and the reason why I've been focusing on Mole Hunt so much and David Wise so much is because he's the one author that mentions your father in his other book, not this book, but in your other book, his other book called Operation Shocker. And this book, he talks a lot about your dad's, I think it's going to be, when it's all said and done, your dad's big defector. That there's a big Russian defector that changes everything. He's involved with Lee Harvey Oswald, this Nosenko guy. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Angleton, this arch nemesis inside the CIA, turns the CIA completely over on itself and does this big mole hunt inside the CIA, looking for this imaginary person who's penetrated the CIA from the KGB, when in actual fact, I think they're trying to cover the fact that Kissinger and Oswald are being used by Angleton for Sullivan and Cromwell and their various investments. So I'm about halfway through the book, and that's why I'm focusing on David Wise right now, because he's the only author I know that wrote about your dad. So, and
that was in Cassidy's Run, which is a book you read a good bit of that last summer, I think, and that involved the beginning of it was a kind of suspicious air crash in which a couple of FBI agents got killed. And following up and seeing what was really going on behind that. And hey, there's been a lot of unexplained deaths, and this is during a time that the CIA was basically trying to recruit all the FBI guys that they could, like Bannister and people like that, to flip. Right. And my dad wasn't one of them. That he didn't go along with that. So, that was a vicious time.
Yeah. And this one is interesting because this starts out with, Angleton bringing in, stopping Nosenko from coming to the United States, which he's the guy who knows all about Oswald. And then he brings in his guy to disparage this Nosenko guy. And then he releases this information saying, oh, it's the K, like Kissinger, but not Kissinger. And he destroys, they ended up destroying 20 different innocent CIA folks' lives. But the first one was a guy named Carlo, who lost his leg, and all. He was just a tremendous.
His name started with a K.
Yeah, with a K. And so they literally started going through the whole thing.
Yeah.
With and destroying these guys' lives with a K in order to put off the suspicion on Kissinger. Well, the part of the book I'm at now, which is 157 into 340 pages, is they're talking about Helms and Richard Helms, and they're saying that here's the thing: is the assassination has happened. We know your dad's involved in looking into Oswald and Ruby. And there's this guy who shows up named Nasenko, who says, I know all about Oswald. And let me tell you, the whole story. Well, they put him in jail. They put him in solitary confinement, one in Virginia and one in Maryland. And then finally goes to Camp Perry in Virginia. And it's the documentation here is so incredible. Angleton definitely was the guy who imprisoned him. Richard Helms was definitely the guy who went along with it, who then later becomes a CIA director. So this is what I love about these stories. It's such a few number of people. Your dad with the poisoner in chief, with Gottlieb.
Yeah.
Richard Helms, again, is the guy who covers that up. So you don't have to, there's Andy bringing up Yuri Nasenko. You don't have to know that many guys to get into this story and really follow along. And Andy's going through the different, it's this battle. This tenant, Pete Bagley, is the guy they bring over to, they stop Nasenko. Nasenko's going to come to America, and he wants to talk to JFK, and he wants to talk to Hoover, and he wants to tell him about Oswald. And he wants to say, hey, Oswald isn't our guy, it's your guy, and it's a fake defector. And there's this guy that they bring over to Switzerland named Pete Bagley, who is Angleton's kind of right-hand man. And he looks just like Bill Taylor.
Yes.
He looks just like Bill Taylor.
The first time I saw him, I said, wow. Now, Bill Taylor today posted a quote, which I had you've seen this yourself probably before, but it's J. Edgar Hoover when he said that there is such an evil conspiracy behind the scenes that it's so big and so incredible that people wouldn't believe it if you told them about it. And he put that quote up there, and it was in 1956 that Hoover was quoted as saying that. You think about now, we realize my dad it must have been an intimate of Hoover's. Yeah. At least, he saw him a lot, and Hoover put a lot of confidence in him. Therefore, he would have said, to my dad, he said, look, there is this conspiracy going on here, and people aren't going to believe it, but this is what we got to deal with. In other words, my dad would have been aware of it as well as Hoover way back in the mid 50s.
Yeah.
And to have been, when you get to the 60s, when he participates in TDY and tries to bust the CIA in their drug dealing,
right?
That is a continuous arc of who he was. That is his character. Just, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let this deep conspiracy win.
Right.
And that's what has led us to where we are right now, George.
Yeah, and the Joint Chiefs play such a pivotal role in this. It's the pivot point in Macduff career, because Hoover has to make this decision. Do I let this great guy go, this Russia-esque guy go, and throw him over to the Joint Chiefs, to Prouty, and I don't know who all else was over there. I know Krulak he worked directly for Krulak, and then Lansdale, I'm thinking, is in there too.
But Lansdale's a special case. He was brought in there immediately, early in '61. In other words, he was there before my dad.
Yeah.
But he was kind of crowded out of Saxa, so that but what he was really doing is, I'm now finding out from the new book I'm reading, JFK versus Dulles.
I know, that's a good book.
What he was doing was running the Indonesia stuff.
Yeah.
So he was over there securing the gold and the oil and the uranium.
The Vogelkopf.
In the Vogelkopf for the Rockefellers.
And then, so Lansdale is kind of pushed out, and then who comes into the Joint Chiefs then? Is it Blackburn or?
No, he's not there until later. The right away, you have there was a couple of generals that didn't last very long. Mm-hmm. Krulak was the first one that really took the bull by the horns and tried to do what the charter of the organization was. And my dad was there before Krulak when Krulak was made the Saxa, that's when they had a party, a big
Yeah, I saw the
thing.
pictures.
And that's where the pictures were taken.
The White House gala event.
Yeah, I found a couple more of those, by the way.
Did you really? Okay.
Yeah, one with Krulak there with all of his medals and everything on his formal Marine uniform. But that is the beginning of it in '62.
Yeah.
So yeah, Krulak, and then
because McGeorge Bundy was sort of hovering around in the Joint Chiefs.
Well, he's
area.
over at State.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there was this idea of the way Kennedy was going to kind of cut the CIA short was going to move them under the Joint Chiefs, and so he had to make sure that the Joint Chiefs were his guys. And your dad was over there at the Joint Chiefs, along with I thought George Bundy was over there, but I couldn't remember exactly. I knew Lansdale was there.
Yeah.
And then it kind of transitioned. And maybe that's a little bit of history I have to fill in my mind.
Yeah, me too. It's not fresh in my mind either. But that was Prouty's thing, though. Prouty was the guy that set up Saxa, and Lansdale was the guy that was the go-to guy. For any of these covert operations, that he was, he had run basically with Dulles, he had run the whole Indonesia rebellion in '58, which also I didn't know until I'm just reading this book now. So
can I just throw a wild one at you? So two things, Harry Bacharach. Great musical talent he is, and he's reading this book, and it's called JFK, or Primary Target JFK. And it's this guy who's in prison in Illinois, getting out of prison now. He's out of prison. And his name's James Files Sutton. And you're familiar with this story? And anyway, he says he was a backup shooter at the Grassy Knoll. And then Lansdale told him, it's not going to come around to you, but if the target hasn't been hit by the time it comes around the corner to you, you need to take the Remington XP 1000 speedball Mercury load, and take your shot. And supposedly he didn't think he was going to be that guy who shot Kennedy, but he says he did. And anyway, this is the confession. So, you never know what to make of these books. They come out and they say this, I killed Kennedy, but I didn't want to, but whatever. But anyway, he says Lansdale was running the whole assassination thing. And I just looked at it and said, well, if you were running the drugs, if this was a huge drug operation from Indonesia and whatever, Burma, you may say Kennedy is going to shut down Vietnam. He's going to shut down our Burma road. He's going to shut down our opium, train, and he's going to shut down Cuba, which is our other cocaine and everything else, heroin train. He's got to go. Maybe. Well,
yeah, but I just really like your rocket scientist much better.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got the real power. Okay, the power behind that is the power behind the World Economic Forum. This is the power of the combined wealth of Europe and Wall Street, and add into that now Silicon Valley and all of this money. That's what would have driven the assassination of Kennedy. There's been, a lot of work done on the James Files thing, and I probably 5-6 years ago spent a little while at it, and I don't think there's an answer. I don't think there's a clear answer as to whether we can or cannot agree that James Files was one of the assassins or the assassin of President Kennedy. But, I would think that there'd have been some really serious corroboration somewhere by now, because this story's been out for a while.
Yeah, now that he's out of jail, I think that's interesting. And, the thing I took away with it it corroborated some of the things that Dan Hopsinger told me about the Red Bird Airport. And hey, after the shoot, we're going to all meet at the Texas Theater, and that's our getaway point, and we're going to get you out over, Barry Seal's going to be waiting there with the Piper Cub, to get you to the Red Bird Airport and onto Cuba for the escape. And Oswald did end up meeting there, after the shoot. So there was a lot of, Johnny Roselli and Sam Giancana and, Carlos Marcello. And he has a lot of facts and figures about all of the mafia people. And the fact that he basically says, look, the CIA is smart enough to sub this out and keep their fingers, keep their fingers out of the pie and keep their distance. And they would have let, the mafia do this thing. So anyway, just an interesting book.
We got a note, and I don't know if you had a chance to look, but from Professor Hamamoto, following up from our Thursday conversation at the Thursday Trio, George. And I was fascinated by this article he found in EIR, the Executive Intelligence Review, published by LaRouche Publications, LaRouche Pub. And this particular one in 1982 by Scott Thompson, The Anglo-Soviet Circles That Created Kissinger. And, is he a Anglo-heir? Is he a British agent? Or is he a Soviet agent? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well, at the end of the day, people talk about Stalin. I said, well, Stalin really was just a White Russian security police chief at the end of the day. He was trained by Cheka. And all these guys, at the end of the day, it's all going to be Rockefeller White Russians that are in all these positions of power. No matter how we think of them as communists or whatever, they all seem to be Rockefeller White Russians. But anyway, continue. I'm sorry, I'm looking at your EIR here.
Well, yeah, because I wanted to get to this part about Golanevsky.
Oh, you got a Golanevsky in here.
Yeah.
Speaking of White Russians, I'm the last heir of the Romanovs. Come on, man. I own the Baku. I have the hereditary, claim on the Baku.
All right. So let me read this and let's hear how you react to this. This is written in 1982. In 1960, the deputy chief of Polish intelligence and former chief of GZI counterintelligence defected directly to the CIA under the pseudonym Michael Golanevsky. During 3 years of debriefings, Golanevsky was to name more Soviet espionage agents functioning in the West than any other defector. Among the more notorious were William John Vassell, the homosexual KGB agent within Admiralty intelligence, whose exposure led Lord Carrington, the first Sea Lord, to tender his resignation. Israel Beer, aka Bieber, not the Bieber, okay, but Beer, a top military advisor of the Israelis and an Austrian who masqueraded as a Jew. GRU Colonel Colon Molody, also known as Gordon Lansdale, think of that as a funny name, Lansdale, head of a ring in England that stole the Polaris submarine secrets. And George Blake, a top MI6 agent whose capture was the final straw that triggered Philby's 1963, quote, escape to the Soviet Union. In all, Golanevsky brought a list of over 250 Warsaw Pact espionage agents involved in dozens of rings throughout the West. One case that never received the public notoriety of Vassell, Beer, or Blake, although it involved people of far greater importance, was known as the ODRA cell, a counterintelligence ring run jointly by the GRU and GZI, whose assignment was to penetrate U.S. and British military intelligence during the occupation of Germany. In 1962-63, when Henry Kissinger was merely a Harvard Don of no major note, Golanevsky reported that Kissinger had been a member of the ODRA cell under the codename BOR, B-O-R. Kissinger was then a non-commissioned officer with the 84th Division's 790th Counterintelligence Corps, based at Oberammergau, West Germany from 1945 to 47. Golanevsky named two other members of the ODRA cell. One was Erich Bosenhard, like Kissinger, a German-born refugee to the United States who joined Army intelligence and was assigned as a clerk at Oberammergau. In 1951, Bosenhard was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment by courts of the Allied High Commission. In his appeal, Bosenhard claimed to have been blackmailed as a homosexual. Another ODRA cell member named by Golanowski was General Horst Wendland, the deputy of General Reinhard Gehlen, who ran Nazi Abwehr intelligence on the Eastern Front, the FHO, and turned his files and staff over to OSS officer Alan Dulles at the end of the war. The charge against Wendland by Golanowski was ignored until '68, by which time General Wendland had become deputy chief of the BND, which is West Germany's CIA. When he was exposed, Wendland committed suicide before he could be debriefed. In December 1973, Golanowski wrote a new memorandum on the ODRA cell, which reportedly led West German security agencies to backtrack upon Wendland's trail to discover who he had protected. This led to the exposure of Gunther Guillaume, an East German refugee who had worked his way up in the SPD to become Chancellor Willy Brandt's aide for party matters. Prominent party leader Egon Bahr had kept Guillaume in the Chancellor's office over repeated protests of West German security services. When ultimately arrested as a captain in East German intelligence, Guillaume was preparing to leave the West with NATO documents, some classified on the, quote, cosmic level, and correspondence between Willy Brandt and President Nixon. So that's a whole lot on Golanowski. The part that I think is so interesting that was it in the 60s that Golanowski basically said that Kissinger was a double agent, just as it was portrayed right there.
Yeah, when, let's see, Kissinger goes up to be Secretary of State for his confirmation hearings, that's when Golanowski steps forward and says, hey, Senate, the guy you're putting in, the first, I think, non-American Secretary of State, the guy you're putting in here is a Soviet spy. Mm-hmm. So it's like, hey, you better stop here. And, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. And so that I think happened in '73 when Nixon put him forward. Nixon, is funny. He had outed a whole bunch of Nazis being put into the for the Polaris missile again down here in Dahlgren in World War II. He was a Navy attaché, and Dulles had he and Dulles had a tete-a-tete over him, saying, "Hey, wait a minute, Nazis are being put into the war machinery here in the United States." So this goes back a ways with Dulles and Nixon was I think a marked man in this sense that something happened that they had to put Kissinger forward. They had something on Nixon, and he had to put Kissinger forward, even though he knew that there were all these liabilities with Kissinger. Obviously, there was Dulles's man was Kissinger. Reinhard Gehlen's man was Kissinger. They'd been friends ever since the end of World War II, and they'd been kind of setting the chess pieces on the chessboard since World War II. So I think this is incredibly interesting with Golanowski, because if you're, I mean, I hate to keep going back to the Rockefellers, but they're really the ones who are setting the chessboard here.
That's right. That's exactly right. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, you can't avoid it, because they're the ones who are saying, hey, we want the Baku. We want the 300 million barrels of oil.
Yeah.
It's really what we want. We're not kidding.
And we want Indonesia too.
we want the darn oil. Come on, man.
Yeah.
So they're going to set things up in such a way that they have hereditary claim. And Golanowski was really important because he's the last of the Romanovs. So if you can parlay him and say, oh, that's really ours, and if you could split Russia, maybe. and just say, we're going to carve off the Baku and you guys can have everything else and we'll start pumping oil there. There's a lot of things that, we looking back in history and hindsight, we don't have all the answers to. But I'm just saying the intrigue here all surrounds oil. It surrounds the Baku. It surrounds Rockefeller. It surrounds the White Russians, and everything else is kind of detail. Those are the central themes. And I think if you get those central themes, you understand what's happening in the story. It's Rockefeller won the Baku.
Yeah. And Mohrenschelt is there. He's, he has no choice but to do his best to get it. And I think Mohrenschelt is also somebody's got stuff on him too. So
yeah, I mean, those guys are the lever arms, if you will. I mean, de Mohrenschildt's father obviously has the, Czars, heredity. All these guys. If you look back one generation, this is what I love about Bill Taylor and Mark Kulak in their research. They're all worked directly for the Czar in some way. They were either like their intelligence chief or their military chief or their naval off, top guy or whatever. And it really is even going back to Stalin, and you could see where, hey, the White Russians wouldn't, and the Czars, I can't remember of all the daughters and sons of Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
But Nicholas was one of them.
Oh yeah.
Right. He was the only one who wouldn't go for the Rothschild,
right.
The monetization plan, the debt plan. Right. And so he said, okay, I'll have Dulles send this guy on a train from Berlin. His name's Lenin. And we'll do a little color revolution to get you Czars out of there. But we're going to keep one guy. We'll keep the last one and we'll do a purge for 20 years. And then we'll bring our White Russian guy in. And that's Stalin. Right. And so if you look at it from that point of view, from an intelligence point of view, it all sort of makes sense. The Rothschilds are pissed off that Nicholas won't go along with the plan that everybody else went along with. Dulles puts Lenin on the train in Berlin. You have a 2-hour revolution in Leningrad. And then how long is it before you get rid of the color revolution guy and you put your White Russian security chief in power? What Lenin had, 6 years, 7 years? I don't know when Stalin took over, 24, 25. It all sort of makes sense if you look at it from a Rockefeller perspective. To me, it's simple then. And
George Shultz's father, Burl Schultz, is working for the American International Corporation. They're at 120 something down in Wall Street, financing.
Don't spin those letters around. American International Corporation.
Yeah, financing the rebuilding of Russia through Rockefeller money.
Yeah, and it's sort of, you can almost explain this history as sort of like a Sullivan and Cromwell notes of a meeting. Well, we'll get rid of this guy because he's being crappy, and then 5 years from now we'll put another guy. Just replace him. So anyway, you're watching the chat, John. What's up with the chat?
Oh, rabbit stew and dumplings from Kevin Timmer. Sounds like he's getting excited about his dinner. Norman Smith says history's not a mystery. I like that. They try to make it a mystery so that we don't see what's going on, but we see what's going on. Yeah.
Well, this is what I love about going down to these different places like New Orleans, and we've got all these documents, and every day that goes by, like you were saying, every day a new Macduff document comes out, or somebody in the Macduff kind of family comes up with something.
Man, I'm so excited to go down to Norfolk. I'm going to go either Monday or Tuesday of this week, and I'm going to go down and investigate the MacArthur Memorial, because I didn't know it, but there's an entire USS Nashville exhibit there. and the veterans from the ship used to gather there and swap stories and leave artifacts and things that are there. I mean, I got to see this. I got to talk to the historians and the conservators of those things. There's an actual U.S. flag that flew on the ship there, and I just really got to see this stuff.
I went down to Norfolk, and I went on the I thought it was the USS. It was a cruiser class ship, like Nashville class, but I didn't think of it was the Nashville that's actually moored there. I want to say it was the Iowa.
Well, that'd be a battleship.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was a battleship class.
Yeah,
thing.
Could be. Yeah, I don't know.
But there's also a national exhibit there.
Yeah, an exhibit of the ship's not there, of course. Actually, the ship, it's and I can't believe that anybody would do this, but at the end of the war, they just sold them all. The Nashville became part of the Chilean Navy.
Oh wow!
And eventually got destroyed for scrap. Sad thing to end a famous ship like that.
Yeah, that is amazing. If somebody in the chat wants to say what's actually moored there, I mean, I stood there and I did 10 films underneath there. I want to say the Iowa, and I don't know why. It's not coming to me, but John, this is a great endeavor that we're on. And you're writing a book, and I'm writing another book about Macduff, and we're writing about taking all the best of the historiography, all the great historians and all the great writers. You're doing that every day. And we're putting the pieces together, and we're telling the truth as we discover it, rather than, oh, there's Andy.
All right. And there's my dad there in a he looks like a pretty tough son of a gun, doesn't he?
He does. He looks like
don't mess with me, master.
He is the G-man right there. And if you buy this book and you bring it down, and hopefully Andy will come down to, we might be under continuity of government right now. And then it was interesting that Macduff had these continuity of government credentials.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. He was, he was like one of the planners for the whole metropolitan area civil defense.
Yeah. And so Andy's bringing up a 1 Minutes to Midnight. If you buy either of these books and you bring them down, you have to buy the paperbacks. You can't buy the Kindle. I can't sign a Kindle. But if you bring them down to CPAC, I'll sign them. If you buy 50 copies, I'll sign all 50. These have all gone collector as they've been banned. And then we're going to New Orleans for 2 weeks. John, I see you looking at your bookcase, so I know you want to grab something off your bookcase.
Well, I was just thinking, George, of the book I was reading this morning, which is called How the Nation Was Won, America's First 150 Years by Graham Lowry. And what hit me was what happened at the so-called Glorious Revolution when
William of Orange, right?
Yeah, William of Orange. And remember, William of Orange is a Dutchman, right?
Oh, sure.
So this is the Dutch, the same Dutch that
we're
are
invading you. We're invading you, so that makes it a glorious revolution.
Well, here's what it turns out to be, though, is that the wealth of Europe had been concentrated back in the Middle Ages in Venice. And then it moved, they moved it, I guess maybe to get away from the Muslims or for whatever reason, they moved to Amsterdam. And that's how Amsterdam got so rich, was by engaging in the trade, not just slave trade, but all kinds of trade, opium, everything else. But that's how you got the stadholders that we talked about last time we were talking about. The picture by Rembrandt of all these guys, and they're
Night Watch,
Night Watch. These are the people that go out and beat up the other people at night while they're parading around like we're the chosen ones. Well, that's the oligarchs of Venice transformed into the oligarchs of the Netherlands. Now, what's happening is when they go to Britain, that London becomes the new center of the oligarchical power, all the unified nobility and merchant class, the rich landowners of all of Europe, including England now. So this William of Orange is coming just like what happened when the Soviet Union fell. They're not coming there to rebuild and help the people of the country. They're coming there to pull it apart, to sell it by the pound.
Right.
Just exactly the way you've described is what the banks did to the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union fell down. And furthermore, just exactly what they're doing to the United States right now, in my humble opinion. And that is just, once again, history repeating itself. That was not a glorious revolution. That was a takedown.
You know, these false flags, you could call them glorious revolutions. You know, I mean, if you are the person writing the history, you call it a glorious revolution. But William of Orange, and I can't remember what his wife, Wilhelmina, was it Wilhelmina?
No, Mary.
Oh, William and Mary, of course.
Poor Mary, the Protestant daughter of James II.
Oh, right.
Because what they did,
you went to you didn't go to William. Yes, you did.
I did go to William and Mary, yeah.
And so did Comey, right? Yeah, down there in Williamsburg.
Not at the same time, no.
No, not at the same time.
Yeah.
But the idea is that, hey, we're the chosen ones, and we're predestined to come to England and rescue you, and we're going to take over, and we're going to have this holy mile of the city of London, right? This quadrant. And then down below the city of London, I don't know if people know or not, but there's all the old Roman ruins of Londinium when London was a Roman port. That's where the Romans used to store all their weapons, basically, for the invasion of England. So I do think that these folks do hearken history. They do think about, the Roman Empire. They do think we're the repersonification of the Roman Empire. And they have these thoughts. Grandiose thoughts. But these grandiose thoughts really do manifest themselves in our world. Yeah.
And that is just another example. Look, as I've been looking, for a few months now into the Habsburgs and how that dynasty still exists. And the people, if you were to get to the latest, Duke or Archduke or whatever they are, and ask them under oath, do you believe that you are appointed by God to be the emperor of Austria-Hungary? They would say, yes, I do.
Sure.
I do absolutely believe that.
And Angleton certainly had a Habsburgian jaw, didn't he? Did he not?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That big square jaw that you see on some people, sometimes they say it's the effect of inbreeding.
Yeah. I definitely do think these, I don't want to say pilgrims, but there is a pilgrim-esque nature to William of Orange, thinking he's, the hand of God is on I can't remember the ship's name, but that this was the same group that launched the Pilgrims that came to, Massachusetts, the same high-handed holy hand, of God, that established the foothold at Plymouth Rock, because I think they ran out of beer. I mean, to be honest,
well, this book I've been reading is a whole new education on what not the Pilgrims so much, but the Plymouth. Not the Plymouth folks, but the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was the real political power that had some independence of Britain and fought to keep it as long as they could. That's a very interesting story that very few people know. You hear the name Cotton Mather and you think of, that's probably one of those fundamentalist nutcase preachers. But in fact, he was a very astute politician which maneuvered between the Dutch of New York, right, which was the New Amsterdam, the Dutch power and the English power, and the French above them, okay, to triangulate an actual independent government. And they had that from maybe 1630 to 1680 or so, more or less. That was what this book refers to as the beginning of the United States as a republic, that the people they had left the old world in order to really create a new world, a new entity that they were going to participate in as a commonwealth, or as, helping each other. And that is the foundation that, the good side of looking at the Pilgrims and the Mayflower and the Plymouth plantation, that it did lead to the growth of an awful lot of people that feel that it's their birthright to be free. And that's the essence of what the people that actually rebelled in the next century.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely think those were the birthstones, or whatever the kindling of the revolution and the idea of independent thought and in America's an independent nation. I do think there, you mentioned Cotton Mather and whatnot. And I do think there was this running thread, though, this Calvinist running thread of the chosen people, that we were the city on the hill and John Winthrop and whatnot. But go ahead.
Well, here's the other interesting thing is that this author attributes that fundamental Calvinism not to a popular movement, but to the influence of the Jesuits. Mm. In other words, the Jesuits will create, a Jonestown. They will create a cult, like your Koreans, and I mean that's part of their bag of tricks over the history of the past 500 years, right? Well, what the thesis of Graham Lowry is that it was the Jesuits who insinuated this kooky idea of if you're only saved if you've predestined to be saved. Mm. And it's a kooky idea because it then creates people like Allen Dulles who will say, oh, well, I was predestined to be saved, so that means that all of those other people over there, they're expendable. They're not going to be saved. It's just, I'm just going to buy them an early ticket, So that enabling of the minds of an Allen Dulles, the minds of a person like Kissinger, the minds of people that think that it's a zero-sum game and I'm going to get everything I can. Those people that have no human empathy, the sense of brotherhood, the sense of just common love of life, love of being American, being a free person, they don't have that. They never had it, and they don't believe that we have it. They think it's a complete illusion, and we are living in some kind of a dream state if we think we're actually free. So
well, so what's bouncing back and forth in my mind here, we're talking about the antecedents, the birth touchstones of our country and how we became a nation, right? And we have these competing ideas of the Calvinist predestined thing, and then we have the Harvard. I always say the Harvard because your dad was Harvard. Mm-hmm. Sort of this egalitarian, all the rights of man, all men are created equal. We all can be great. City on a Hill, John Winthrop. I'm trying to think of some other thinkers that were, the Unitarian thinkers, the John Locke's and whatnot that were in Boston there. And because I know you had Roger Brown in
Roger Williams?
Really, Roger Williams in Rhode Island, which was even more chosen than.
Well, that was the Baptist.
But wasn't there a push pull between?
Oh,
these
absolutely.
Two yeah,
and that's one of the great things about this book is Lowry does describe it very, very well. And you have the original idea of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was the Cotton Mather and the next one, Increase Mather. They were trying to preserve the idea of what we would call a republic today. But it's not a big one. It's, a few thousand people at best. But to have it be able to be independent so that it could say no to the Navigation Acts of England and go ahead and trade with French and trade with Spanish and trade with the foreign powers that England, under its laws, forbids you to trade with. But they said, no, we have a charter that says we can govern ourselves. So we're writing our laws about trade, and we're opening our ports to France, to Spain, to anybody that wants to do business with us, because we are here to be free. And that was the basic conflict that led to when King James II comes back after the Restoration, in 1660, the end of the Cromwell Protectorate, and that was the end of the Republic as that had existed for a little while in Britain under the Cromwell time. Well, you come back with the royal government, and people, all they want to do is to take away the old charters of freedom and say, no, we're going to impose a royal governor, and this guy is going to run your colony for you, and you're going to do what you're told. And there is where by the time that they did that, there had already been a tradition of 3-4 generations of people that had the idea that, hey, no, we're living in a free country here, and we're not going to go along with that.
Yeah, so I see where you're going here. It's this idea of freedom and self-determination that you're saying is operative in the American psyche, American soul right now, and we still want to throw off this yoke of this globalist, banker. No, you're going to be here. We're going to give you this much IMF loan, and you're going to be saddled with this, and you're going to be happy to be a slave, and this is kind of the globalist versus nationalist battle we have today. In a way,
it's good that you bring it right up to today, because just look at Texas as an example of what they're doing. Is they are gradually decreasing our ability to generate power. And so we have our rolling blackouts. We had California last summer. We had other ones over the past decade or so. But this thing in Texas is really a horrible, horrible event. And it is the result of, I would say it's the result of not investing in backup systems and having the proper, backups in place so you could get power from another state or from Mexico or wherever if you needed it. To have a responsible government that forces the utilities to have the backup plans and not to undercut the safety of the citizens in order to profit by doing it cheaply. And that is the essence of what, the fight over deregulation. I don't want there to be any more regulations than there has to be. But on the other hand, if we're going to have a monopoly of power given to one company, and that's the way it's done all over the country, right? You've got to have somebody that's forcing them to be prepared for these emergencies. But they don't want to invest. And the money that's behind all of it now is being turned into this green revolution. And that means that you're not going to be able to get a loan to invest in a power plant. You're not going to be able to refurbish your engines or whatever it is, because you won't be able to borrow money unless you are investing in something that they like, such as wind turbines or solar or something that is really not going to be efficient over the long term. And that is the long-term plan that is being revealed as we see what they're doing to undercut the infrastructure of the United States, thereby undercutting our health, undercutting the budget, and basically making the government look like it can't handle the job, and we need somebody to come in and save the day.
Harry the Greek, the great researcher, sent me a message earlier tonight saying the ERCOT, I guess ERCOT is the people that do the surveying or readiness exercises for the power plants. And he says that they did not conduct on-site audits to verify the winter preparedness. So that this is, again, like Nancy Pelosi being the mayor of the Capitol saying, oh no, stand down. We're only going to have rent-a-cops. We're only going to have 3 rent-a-cops. Most of our rank and file are going to stay home, and we're going to have little bicycle barricades, and we're not going to have, and we're going to encourage people to come over because we want them to, create some kind of, event so that we can then label them white supremacists. So when I see this thing that Harry the Greek sent me about ERCOT and no winter preparedness, is exactly what you say, John. It's setting up the fall so that we can then say, oh, we need this massive global solution, which is green energy, which really means us and brokering nuclear energy to the world, right?
Well, they'll have the nuclear energy that they want, but if we want it, it'll be dear. You'll have to pay top dollar for it. And the other thing is that it's quite clear, even to somebody that's not scientific like me, that the efficiency of investment into wind and solar power is very, very low. And the idea, one of the ideas that is a good measurement for it is, can it replace itself? In other words, the cost that it takes to build your wind farm. Okay. Well, your wind farm's going to last how long? Let's say 20 years. Okay. During that 20 years, can the wind farm make enough money to replace itself when it's obsolete? And the answer is probably no, because it's just not making that much energy. It's not making enough money. Whereas, other water power is extremely effective, and other power sources, traditionally coal and nuclear and things, are much more efficient than these wind things or the solar. So they get us down into the solar, and then that's when they really own us, because even if we wanted to expand our economy again and rebuild and reinvest in trying to have a more energy for a more exciting and better life, we wouldn't be able to, because, as I say, they'll have their nuclear power. We won't have any nuclear power. We'll be just trying to get by on solar and wind, just like in the Middle Ages, George.
Well, one of the best comments I ever heard, or just the presentations, was Mark Kulak talking about energy and portability of energy.
Yeah. And
he was talking about, if I want to get X number of millions of megawatts out of a country, I could do it with oil, and I could steal 100 oil tankers that are full of oil, or I could take one suitcase full of uranium out of the country. And so even though if nuclear isn't as efficient as oil, it's a thief's dream, because it's only one suitcase. And so I think when you're dealing with this international, den of thieves, that's why nuclear makes the most sense, because it's the most portable. And so that's why we track it in our story. But we've covered a lot of ground here.
It was fun, man. I don't have, there's no holds barred here. And I
bing, bing, bing.
well, that's the thing, George. I just, it's just such a pleasure for me. And thank you so much for coming over, spending a little time with me Saturday night here at Mystery Island. And gosh, I wish I could just get in your suitcase and go with you everywhere. But
yeah.
We'll have another venture. What I'm going to do, George, is plan something for around June the 6th of this year, which will be the 50th anniversary of my dad's death. And so I'll be looking for that and doing some planning. I'll keep everybody informed. And thanks very much again to everybody that helps support the channel, like Jumping Mouse, who's doing such wonderful, not only keeping up the playlist here on YouTube and on Screaming Ospreys itself, but also now republishing everything over on BitChute as fast as she can. Very dedicated person, and I just love you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Andy and Aaron and everybody at Neighborhood News Studio. And George, gosh, let's do it again soon.
Yeah, let's do it again soon. We have Thursday nights with Dr. Hamamoto. And if you're not watching John with his books, start, because it's a great way to catch up. And I these summaries, it used to be that you were doing each chapter, but now you're doing like 3 or 4 chapters at a whack.
I'm doing a 1-hour summary of all the books on the book train, and every Wednesday night. So, and there's about 10 of them that I've done already over at screamingospreys.com. So if you just turn it on for an hour, you'll get my greatest hits of each of the books.
Yeah, check those out because it catches you up. And all I can say is, if you want to be a good researcher, you have to get this groundwork. You just have to do that spade work. It's kind of like when you want to make your garden flourish, you got to get the weeds out. You got to kind of, fumigate it and, do the tilling. Do those books. Go do those 1-hour books and get that grounding. And then you're going to be a much happier researcher.
And get right on over to Amazon and order your George Webb books for the CPAC convention. So you have some when you get there, and he'll sign them for you. Right, George?
And I'll sign as many as you buy.
Right. Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks again, everybody. God bless you all, and we'll see you again. I'll be back on Monday morning at 11. And next week, we'll have an exciting week with Harley Schlanger and a number of great guests. So we'll see you then.